the idea of being a Southerner is not something I'm ashamed of. You know, I'm not ashamed to be a Southerner. I'm ashamed of what Southerners do in the name of the South. But I'm not ashamed to be from the South.
All right. Let me ask you this. And I love asking authors this question in terms of, does the character develop as you come up with the plot, or you have the plot first and you figure out, you know what, I know I need a character to do this, to be that way?
For me, it's always about the character first. I have to visualize what the character is, who he or she is. I have to understand them. Like, one of the things I do, one part of my process is I write pretty extensive biographies for my main characters, and a lot of that stuff doesn't make it into the book, but it gives me a context to create this character, to make this character a person. So, like, for instance, All Sinners Bleed. There's a scene in there, and it's just not a spoiler. There's a scene in there where Titus discovers a body in a cornfield, and he goes to examine the body. A corn snake comes out of the body's mouth. Well, what you don't know, and what his deputies don't know, is that Titus is afraid of snakes, because that's in that biography. So when he was 14, he got bit by a copperhead, but he can't show that. And so I know that, so that informs the way he acts in front of his deputies. It informs the way he examines that body. And it also gives you an idea of how strong his will is, that he's able to do that even though he's terrified of those animals. So for me, character comes first, and then I build a story around them. Somebody told me writing is putting a character in a tree and throwing rocks at them. And that's and see how much they can take. And so for characters like Titus, Titus can take a lot. It's a running joke that he don't get no sleep, though.
No. In terms of Titus, because I'm curious, was there any other inspiration in creating? And I can tell that Titus, you said Titus is a sheriff in this town. So was there any other inspiration?
Yeah. So really, All Sinners Bleed really started out as a very different book. I started writing that in the wake of the murder of George Floyd, and I wanted to use a small town sheriff's department to talk about policing in America. But what I realized as I was writing the book, I was too personally involved. I couldn't give the book the distance and the deference it needed. And so I shifted gears and made it into a mystery. And Titus was inspired. So back home, back in Virginia, in my hometown, we've never had a black sheriff. But the next county over has had two. And they're the only two in the history of Virginia. And they're 15 years apart. And so for me, I wanted to talk about a character like that. One of the sheriffs, former sheriff now, I got to talk to him and have lunch with him a couple times. And he was the sheriff during a time where there was a national murder case that happened there. A teenage girl and her boyfriend killed her parents. And so he had to deal with that. But he also told me, like, he had to deal with that with, news organizations coming there. But he still had to, go to the bar and break up the drunk fights. He still had to, like, make requisitions for gas and uniforms. And so he gave me this sort of idea of that when you're a black sheriff, you're walking a really fine line. And that's what I try to represent with Titus, that half the county hates you, the other half don't trust you. And so how do you navigate it? How do you deal with that? So a lot of Titus's philosophy came from these conversations I had with him, which he didn't want me to thank him in the book. I don't know why. He was like, don't put my name in the book. I'm like, all right, I mean, that's fine, I guess. But everybody else wants to be in my books. Like,
and again, I hope it's not a spoiler, but there's a serial killer.
Yeah, so the plot of
Is this somebody you know?
No.
Okay, I'm just checking.
Well, it's so funny writing stories set in small towns, because usually it's not a whodunit. We all know who did it. It's like, can you prove it? But no, so I grew up near Williamsburg, Virginia. And when I was a kid, there was a serial killer case in Williamsburg, the Colonial Parkway murders. 8 couples were murdered over the course of 2 years. And that was something that really stayed with me as a kid and growing up as an adult. And so, but I also wanted to use the serial killer. I think the serial killer has sort of replaced the vampire and the werewolf as our sociological boogeyman, right? And so using that character, I wanted to see how a town or a place deals with what is unequivocally evil. There's a lot in life that's black and white. And I think we can all agree a serial killer is evil. And how do you deal with that? How does the town respond? Not just Titus, but the citizen. How does that affect everyone? And so that's sort of where the serial killer came from. But then a lot of the characters in there are just people I know. They're my cousins, my friends. It's funny because everybody back home wants to be in the books. Like, I'll be in the supermarket and so like, yeah, put me in the book. I was like, have you read my books? People tend to get shot in the face a lot, and like they're like, yeah, kill me like that. I'm like, oh, okay. I mean,
That's funny. Have you ever developed a character and then you started to not really like this character and they were like, you know what, you can't make it in the book?
I wouldn't say I disliked the character, but I had a character that I thought was really cool, and I've never been able to fit him in a book. So I had this character I called Madness Monroe. He's a former Black Panther revolutionary and lives in a ramshackle farmhouse out in the middle of nowhere. Still he makes like ghost guns and stuff like that. And I thought he was a really cool character, and I've never been able to work him in a book. So he's like off to the side. Eventually, one day, I think he'll be able to do it. I've never really disliked even the villains. I don't dislike them. What has happened more often is a character has more to say, and so they make their presence known. Like with Razor Blade Tears, Buddy Lee was supposed to be a side character. He's supposed to be sort of a sidekick. But yeah, everybody likes Buddy Lee, but he just wouldn't shut the hell up. And so like, I was like, I guess you getting the co-lead now. But yeah, Buddy Lee gets the jokes and Ike gets the good threats. So yeah, but yeah, he was supposed to be like more like Ike's sidekick, and he just would not stop talking. And ultimately, the relationship between Ike and Buddy Lee is what is the crux of the book. So I didn't anticipate that. So that sort of happened on its own.
What do you do if it's happened to you? What do you do if you are stuck at a place, either with a character or what's going to happen next?
I do something else. I walk away from it. I go lift weights. I watch a movie. I love music, so I listen to music. Sometimes I leave it alone for a couple weeks and try to get unstuck. It's gonna sound egotistical. I never feel like I have writer's block. I always think I'm gonna figure it out, right? But I do know when I need to like take a step away, stop banging my head against the wall, metaphorically speaking, sometimes actually speaking, and and just let the story come to me. It's funny because I attended college, but I had to drop out. My mom got really sick, and so I've never went back. But I've been asked to speak at so many colleges, like over 20 colleges. And it's so funny because I always do these lectures about writing, but it's hard sometimes because I'm superstitious. I don't want to examine it too much. I don't really know how I do what I do. I've just always had this ability to see stories in my head, to tell stories. And so I have this sort of confidence in my ability that even when the story's going bad, and there are times when it goes really bad, I feel like I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to get it because my mother used to say, she used to say, birds got to sing, bees got to sting, you got to write. That's your thing. And so I figure I'm going to get it. I'm going to do it. So I don't really think about that. It is funny because like I've won a lot of awards, and I've won awards for like short stories and stuff like that. And one of my short stories that won an award, I had a friend one time ask me, a very, very good writer, a friend of mine named Jordan Harper. He said, man, that story you won that award for, how long did it take you to write it? And I said, I don't know, 30 minutes. And he looked so ticked off. And so he was like, no, really? I was like, no, 30 minutes. And he was like, oh, I hate you. Oh, my God. But it's just I guess it's just, I feel like that's the thing I have. And so I never feel like I'm not going to figure it out.
That's a good answer. I want to shift for a moment because this has come up. How do you feel about the use of AI?
You know what?
Y'all know me.
Here's the thing, I told somebody this the other day, and they didn't like it, but I didn't care. AI is like if you go, Denise Graves is an opera singer. If you go to hear Denise Graves in person, right, you are a member. You are enjoying in that artistic moment. Yeah, AI is like recording Denise Graves and then playing it through a really busted speaker. You know, you're not a part of that creative process anymore. Here's the thing. People will tell me all the time, well, I use AI to help me because writing is hard. It's supposed to be hard.
Yeah.
So anything worth doing is going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. Here's the thing. If it was easy, everybody would do it. You know? So that's the thing. And the funny thing is, the AI that we have now, it's not really AI. It's an algorithm. It's a combination of different styles, different writing. It's just souped up Mad Libs is what it is.
Yeah.
And so, the computer's not writing it for you. And people say, well, I polished it. I did this. I did it. Well, no, you didn't. It's like your mama cooking a cake, but you telling somebody you made it. And so that's the way I feel about it.
I have done that, by the way. That sweet potato pie. Yeah, I was up on. It's interesting you say that because as a journalist, and we just had a conversation on my show about this, about the use of AI in what we do in our industry. And some people say, well, if it helps a writer unblock or helps them with a guideline, then there's nothing wrong with that. And maybe it depends on the genre. I don't know.
I think if you're a journalist and you're writing a nonfiction story about a political event or something like that, that's different. Not that that's not creative, but you're pulling that from a different place.
Sure.
You're pulling from a different place inside you. Writing is so personal.
Mm-hmm.
Writing is spiritual. You know, Stephen King said that writing is telepathy, because when you read my book, you're reading my mind.
Yeah.
We're having a conversation across millions of miles, across years. And so for me, when you delve into AI, it doesn't ring true, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, you ever seen that show like Pawn Stars, and somebody brings something in there and they think it's worth a lot of money and it's not, you know, and it's like, I can only give you $12. That's what an AI book feels like to me, because it's not worth it, because I know you didn't work on it. I know you didn't work at it. You go in and you do spell check on it. That's not the same as sitting down and delving into your heart to bring this story to life.
Yeah.
You know, Blacktop Wasteland, if you want to know about me, if you want to know anything about me, read that book. Because those people in that book, Bug's father is my daddy. Bug's mama is my mother. Mm-hmm. You know, those are the people that I love. The pain, the frustration, the happiness, the joy, all of that comes from inside. I don't think you can replicate that with an algorithm.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of Stephen King, there's a New York Times editorial review. Stephen King reviews your
He
book?
reviewed All the Sinners Bleed. It was so funny because I didn't know that was going to happen. And I was at this convention in New York. There's a big convention called Thriller Fest. All kinds of mystery writers and crime writers are there. And I was downstairs doing a panel. And I left my phone upstairs to charge it. So I go back upstairs to the room, and I have like 1 million messages. I'm like, what is going on? And like somebody was like, you got to go online. And I was like, what happened? Am I being canceled? Did I kick somebody's dog? And I go online, and Stephen King had reviewed All the Sinners Bleed. And it was a line in that review that stuck with me. He said something about, he says, you know, I don't know anything about S.A. Cosby. I know he's from the South. I know he's from a small rural town. I'm a 74-year-old white dude from a rural town. He said, but there's a line in this book that unites us. So there's a line in the book where Titus is riding around town, and an opossum runs across the road. And he slams on brakes, because if you grew up in a small town and you know anything about wildlife, you do not want to hit an opossum. They ain't nothing but muscle. They'll tear your car up. And he said that moment rings so true to me from my experience and the life that I've lived. And so for me, that was just, you know, I cried. It was so crazy. I cried. I got it framed and everything. And the funny thing also about that review is he didn't like everything, but that made me realize he read it. You know, so that made me realize, okay, he didn't like this, he didn't like that, but he liked enough of it that I realized you actually read the book. And it's so funny because I've never met him, but like he's tagged me online a couple times. And
really?
Yeah.
Just casually throw that in there.
Yeah.
Stephen King, you know, he casually just tagged me, and
then he
we went to dinner.
They reissued his book on writing, which is his part autobiography, part writing manual. And he had reached out to his publisher. He had a list of writers that he wanted to blurb the 25th edition. So I got to be in that too. So that's him paying me back for Salem's Lot scaring the hell out of me when I was 12.
I want to go back to Titus for a moment, because when you talked about these characters being real, being personal for you, when you develop a character and you're done with it and you're done with the book, do you think, okay, maybe I could have, or do you concern, based on a review is where I'm going, or do you even worry about reviews?
I don't worry about reviews.
Okay, good.
Like I used to. Like when I first started writing, I would obsess over 1-star reviews. Yeah. I was like, oh man, this book must be terrible. What I learned, a lot of people like to write 1-star reviews so they can see how clever they are.
Yeah.
And so I don't worry about that anymore. I do. Here's the thing. I don't take anything for granted, so I never mail it in. When I write a book, I grew up, like I said, really poor. So for me, I want my book to be worth your $27.50. I don't want you to feel like you put that money down and you didn't get your money's worth. So I'm giving you all I got. If you don't connect with the book, that's fine. Somebody else will. Like, again, my mother, one of her sayings, everything ain't for everybody. And so I don't think about that. Now, on the other hand, I will reread books that I've written that people tell me are really great, and I'll see stuff, oh, I should have done something different there. I should have changed that, or that run on too long. But you can't let perfection be the thief of joy.
So let me ask you this: when you think about the process, your writing style for All Sinners Bleed, and going back to your first one, Brotherhood, is there a difference?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, I wrote a fantasy novel called Brother of the Blade. I wrote that book without knowing how to write a book. I just sat down. That's why it's 180,000 words. And I think I've gotten better over time. I think the thing is, being a writer is a two-part. It's a dichotomy, right? Writing is the art, and then publishing is the business. I've gotten better at the business end of it. Like when I first started writing, I used to, in my books, because I like Shakespeare, everybody died. Like, I'd kill everybody. And my agent was like, you got to stop doing this. Like, everybody doesn't have to die. And so, but I learned from that because he said, he's a smart agent, he says, the last sentence of the book is the last taste that people have in their mouth for what they've read. And so I learned, okay, you can't kill everybody. I kill a lot of people, but I don't kill everybody. But I also think I've gotten better at understanding the story itself. What story am I telling? What am I trying to say? And so I think for me, I try to improve with every book. I try to challenge myself with every book. It's very easy to rest on your laurels, I think. I think when you write a series, you have to work harder when you're writing a series to challenge yourself because people have expectations. I've never written a series. I've never gone back to certain characters. People want me to.
Yeah.
Because everybody wants me to write about Titus again.
Yeah.
Which is funny because I really was resistant to that for a long time, and I didn't want to hear it. And I went to a book signing, and this lady was there. And so, for people that have read the book, there's a character that comes into town. His ex-girlfriend, Titus' ex-girlfriend. Yeah, I know, right? And you know where I'm going with it. And so this lady was like, Titus had no business going to her house at night. I was like, I know. And she said, well, you gotta bring him back so he can redeem himself. And I'm like, no, I don't. But then I thought about it, and I said, well, maybe I could bring him back. Maybe we could see what happens with Darlene and Kelly and his love life and other things. So I don't know. I'm thinking of an idea maybe to bring him back.
And so because I'm nosy and so is the audience, is this based on some real stuff?
I will say this, I've not always made good decisions. That's a long time ago, though.
Bruh. I don't want to get you in trouble because this is being live streamed. I don't know who watching.
Yeah.
I don't know who you got to go home to. Why you to that lady in Atlanta? I was watching. The business end of this. What about this industry or in terms of the business part of this that you just don't like?
I don't like the fact that if you are what we could call a marginalized writer or let's say a non-cisgender white male, you don't get as many times to hit the home run. I know, I'm not going to name names, but I know a white writer who's a friend of mine, white male writer, straight male writer, had a book. It was supposed to be the book of the year. He got a huge advance, all these promotion around it, all this publicity around it, and it didn't do well. It really didn't do well. And he said to me, because he dusted himself off, wrote a different book, and he made a very honest comment. He says, I was telling him how proud I was of him. And I said, wow, you really pulled yourself back from the brink with that. He said, honestly, I'm a white man in America. I'm going to fail up. The system is built to help me. We don't get those options.
Yeah.
If you're a writer of color, if you're a gay writer, if you're any kind of writer that's not in that sort of heteronormative sort of position, if your first book doesn't do well, 90% of the time, you're not going to get a second chance. They just won't do it. And so I think that's the thing I really hate because I've seen books by writers who are really good down the vine. Also, I think, and I've been lucky because my publisher hasn't done this with me, but you'll see a publisher, especially like a couple years ago in the wake of George Floyd, publisher did a lot of flashy media, like we're going to promote different voices and distinct, diverse voices. And then they would buy books and wouldn't give you the marketing budget, wouldn't come up with a marketing plan, wouldn't put you on tour. And then they act surprised that the book didn't do well. I think, I don't want to say I benefited from it, but the fact that Black Heart Wasteland came out during COVID, it was like, it sort of made it more of a meritocracy because nobody was touring. Right. And so that book just built up word of mouth. and I'm very lucky for that. I'm very blessed for that. But again, I don't think all of us, people look like us, get that chance all the time. So that's the thing I really don't like.
And what about the plight of small publishing houses, and particularly those that are run by folk of color?
It's so difficult. Like, nobody will say this, but the big five publishers, it's a monopoly. It really is. And so, for instance, to get a book bound, to actually put the hardcover on it, there's only 3 or 4 companies in America that do that. And if you're a small independent publisher and you don't have a deal with them, you're not getting your books bound. You can get them bound through Amazon, through KDP, but it's not the same quality. You're not going to get hardcovers at all. They only do paperback. So, like, if you don't have a contract with Ingram, right, it's hard to get your books in Barnes & Noble, in Walmart, in a Target. And so that is so difficult. And I think that's where I see there's a big opportunity for a more diverse, a more equitable sort of business model there. And I know people that are trying to do it, that are working on it now, and I would love to see that, because people don't understand the actual physical construction of the book makes a huge difference.
Have you, I know we talked a little bit about this in the back, but everyone wants their favorite novel to be on the big screen. And we've seen some adaptations that have just, let's be really clear, they were terrible, because that's just the way it is. No movie is really going to take the story line exactly the same way in the book. Do you, I mean, you probably would like to see them big screen, but do you make sure you have some,
So what's funny is, so all of my books have been optioned, right? Darkest Prayer is optioned for a TV series.
How do you just drop that so casually? All my books have been optioned.
Well, because when they first started optioning, like, I didn't have any say about anything. They come and offer you money. You don't have a say about the director. You don't have a say about the actors. They just give you your money, and they didn't give me a lot of money, but I was like, I'll take it because I got bills to pay. And so, but as the books, I was very blessed that the books became more successful. We all know, green makes the world go round. Cash rules everything around me. So the more money you make, the more successful you are, the more say you have. So you look at Darkest Prayer, have no say with that. Black Top Waste, a little more say. Raised by Tears, I was able to talk to the producers. I was able to meet the directors. I still didn't have a say, but those directors, actually, have become friends of mine. They were reaching out for my input. By the time you get to All the Sinners Bleed, now it's like I got an executive producer credit. It's going to be on Netflix limited series. I get to look at script approval. I get to look at all that kind of thing. So as you grow, thank you. I'm really excited about it. I'll tell you a funny story about that. So even in that, even when you're successful, you will run across people that still take you for granted. So the book came down to 2 networks, Netflix and another network that I'm not going to say who it is, but they've been in your home. They talk about box office. And so we had a meeting with them, and they brought in like a actor that they wanted to be in the story and all that kind of stuff. But the whole time we had the meeting, they kept calling Titus Travis. Yeah. I corrected them one time. Because they're like, we're so excited, Sean. We really want to be in business with you. And, Travis is such a great character. I was like, Titus. The second time they said it, I didn't correct them. I mean, the third time I said, well, I don't care how much money you give me. I'm not going to be in business with you.
Wow.
That's what I was thinking in my mind. So when I talked to the folks at Netflix, they knew his name was Titus. They had read the book. They knew the details. They knew stuff about the construction of the book. They knew stuff about me. They were so invested in the story that I felt comfortable giving them the reins. And so now it's going to be a limited series. Joe, I can never think of this boy's name. The guy who co-wrote Black Panther with Ryan Coogler is going to be the showrunner.
Wow.
And they've written the pilot, or not the pilot, but the first episode, which I read it, is very good. It's really good. It's funny because, like you said, a TV show or a movie is not going to be the book.
Right.
But if you're lucky, and I hope I am, it will take the things that are most prescient in the book and expand them. And I think I've been very lucky. Walter Mosley, who I got to meet and has become a mentor to me and just the nicest person in the world. Yeah. He gave me a piece of advice about when they started coming around, wanting to adapt my stuff. He gave me 2 pieces of advice. He said, whatever money they offer you, tell them to double it because they got it. and he said, don't get upset about an adaptation. He said, adaptation is like somebody coming to your house and cooking in your kitchen. If they don't burn the house down and nobody gets food poisoning, everything's fine. So
you had an interesting phone call with someone that the audience may know.
Yeah. So I have a book coming out in June called King of Ashes. Thank you. And so when we were selling the rights to that, it was a whole bunch of people that showed up for that. It was like, I was surprised. It was so weird to get up and go to a Zoom call. Like, oh, I'm having a Zoom call with Antoine Fuqua today. Meanwhile, my cat's throwing up because he won't take his medicine. And so eventually it came down to one other production team and Netflix. And Netflix wanted to partner with Amblin, which is Mr. Steven Spielberg, and Higher Ground, which is the Obama's production company. So we were going back and forth, and my agent was, he's negotiating all this money and stuff. And finally, the people at Netflix are like, what can we do to make us be in business together? I was like, I don't know. We're still thinking. They're like, we'd like someone to call you. I was like, okay. So I'm sitting in the house, and my phone rings, and it's not a regular phone number. It's like a 91, an ampersand, a hashtag, an @ sign, then like 7 other numbers, then like a Cyrillian C. And I was like, what is this? And I almost didn't answer it. And I was like, let me see what this is. So I answered, and it's like, hello, is this Sean Cosby? And I'm like, yeah. Well, this is Amos Brown. I'm President Obama's assistant. And I'm like, you who? The what? And like, he says, if you have a few moments, President Obama would like to speak with you. I thought I was going to pee my pants. So he gets, and then like the next voice you hear is going to be President Barack Obama. And I'm sitting there, and then like all of a sudden it's like, Sean. Barack Obama, big fan. And I'm like, I don't know what to say right now to you, sir. And he was like, they wanted me to talk to you because we really want to be in business with you. And I don't know if you voted for me. I voted for you. Everybody I know voted for you twice. And so he was like, well, I don't know if this helps, but I read the book. I really love it. And I was like, I'm so sorry for all the curse words. I'm like, I really apologize, sir. He said, no, that's fine. And so then he says, he stopped and he says, I think you're a really important writer. And I was like, I don't know how to respond to that. And he said, well, say thank you. And I was like, and he said, well, if this works out, maybe we can maybe have lunch. And I was like, all right. And he was like, you got to pass the background check. And I was like, oh, man, I got to think about, I got in a bar fight in 2012, so I hope that's not still on my record. But no, it was like one of those moments. Like, I wish I could get another phone and put that phone in plexiglass.
Yeah.
And just, but it's one of those moments where it's like I've mentioned it a couple times, but I grew up really poor. My mother was disabled. She had spinal stenosis. Her and my dad separated. We lived with my grandparents for a long time. We didn't have a car growing up. I didn't have running water until I was 17.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those moments where you realize like how far you've come, and it's like you can't, like if you went back in time and told your 12-year-old self, hey, one day you're gonna be sitting in a house and the former president of the United States is gonna call you.
Yeah.
It's like it's beyond your wildest dreams. So.
Oh. Because the last decade has been full of a lot of wow, beyond your wildest dreams. When you think back to, let's say, 11, 12 years ago, maybe those times you were in a hardware store.
I remember I was working in this hardware store, and I was one of the assistant managers, big hardware, Lowe's store, right? And there was a day where a guy comes in. We used to let service animals come in, right? And this guy comes in, and he has this little spider monkey in the basket, right? He's wearing a little diaper and stuff. And he was like, that's not a service animal. So I had to go over. Mm-hmm. I was like, sir, you can't have the monkey in here. You got to take him outside. He's like, no, he's fine. He's not going to bother anybody. I said, sir, you can't have him in here. He's like, he's not going to hurt anyone. The moment he said that monkey grabbed his finger and bit it. And then he took off that little diaper, and he started flinging it around. And I remember, and that was my department, so it's like monkey poo or everything. And it was another guy helping me, another coworker, and we were cleaning up. We had to clean it up, right? And I remember thinking, I got to do something different. I can't be cleaning up monkey poo the rest of my life. And so I told my store manager, a couple months later. I had been there for a while. I'd been there like 11 years. And he kept wanting me to go to store management training. I kept putting it off because I knew if I went to store management training, I'd never write. I wouldn't have time. And so finally, I got a part-time job somewhere else. And I said, I'm going to take a year off. And, well, not off, but I'm gonna leave here. I'm going to work this part-time job, and I'm going to try to write a book. And my store manager, he says, that's really hard, man. That may not, a lot of people don't make success at that. He said, you always have a place back here if you want to come back. And I said, I really don't want to come back. So fast forward like 4 years, and Black Tie Wasteland's out. And I went and I gave him a copy of Black Tie Wasteland, and I signed it. I said, "Dear Mike, I don't think I'm coming back." And so I think about that a lot. I think growing up like that, working like that, coming from a blue-collar background, it makes me very appreciative of everything. I don't take anything for granted because, once you've had to fight a raccoon in the outhouse, everything else is gravy.
So
1-star reviews ain't no skin off my back.
and not only that, I feel like in 2026 the next Monkey Poo by S.A. Cross is coming out, right?
Well, I'll be fine because I've got to build up tolerance to it. So,
how do you sum up this journey?
I think, I went to a talk at an intermediate school, 8th grade students one day a couple years ago. And it was about 150 students. About 35 of them were black. And after I talked to them, one of the kids came up to me, he's 12, 13-year-olds, and he says, I didn't know there were black writers. Wow. I said, what? He's like, I didn't know there were black writers. I didn't know black people wrote books. And I was like, really? And I said, wow, there's so many black writers I could tell you about, so many black writers that I grew up reading, And he was like, do you make a living at this? And I was like, yeah. And I asked the teacher, I said, can the kids walk outside with me? And they were like, yeah. So we walk outside. And one of the gifts I bought myself when I got that royalty check was I bought myself a Dodge Challenger. So I walk outside, and the kids see it and everything. And all the kids were oohing and ahhing, right? But that one young man, he comes to me. He said, you bought that? Like, you wrote and bought? I said, yeah. And I told him, I said, here's the thing. There was a time when people told us that you could be anything. You didn't believe it because you thought in the back of your mind, well, you can't be president. And then Barack Obama was elected president. I said, I'm telling you, you can be anything you want to be. All you got to do is try. And for me, the books are great. The money is great. The success is great. But knowing that there are kids, black, white, Latinx, what have you, that will see somebody that looks like me and see that I made it, like coming all the way from, like I said, the outhouse, living in a single-wide trailer, to being, on TV, to being in France, to being flown around the world. So for me, the journey that I've had, I just want it to be a journey that other people think they can take. Rising tide lifts all boats. And so when people talk about how successful I am, like if you follow me on social media, I'm always talking about other books, always talking about other writers, because we're not alone in this, Yeah. We're all together in this. And so for me, as much it has been so satisfying for me individually, it's even more satisfying for me that I hope whatever, I'm going to give you one last comment from my mom. So my mother used to say, the shine wears off of new pennies real quick. Well, she was telling me that about a girl I like, but that's a whole nother story. But I think, for me, I think about it this way. Whatever shine that I have, I want to use it to rub it off on other people, And, because there's going to be a day when I'm not going to be the hot kid. Roller coaster goes up, roller coaster come down. But if I can use it to help other writers, help other people, then I feel like I've done something worthwhile in addition to my books. So I'm very lucky to be able to do this.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much. I know we're going to have some questions from the audience. We do have time for some questions, right? Library folk, where y'all be? Okay. We have some time, okay. Stand up and ask your question. Yes.
So Titus, so that's funny because my daddy's a big music fan. So Buddy Lee, I always think of Buddy Lee. There's a song by Johnny Cash called "God Can Strike You Down," cut you down. And I always think of that as Buddy Lee. For Titus, it's so funny because Titus, he can be violent, he can be strong, but really he's very cerebral. He thinks a lot. And so for me, I always think of Al Green, Let's Stay Together. I just think I can see him riding around listening to that. So that's what I think of for him. So, but don't cross him because then it's M.O.P. Annie up. Maybe that's Bug. That's probably Bug.
Next question or comment over here.
So Buddy Lee, the question was, what was the inspiration for Buddy Lee? So I grew up, like I said, in a small town. When I was growing up, I had mostly black friends, but I had one white friend, friend of mine named Joey, and I met him in kindergarten. And the way I met him was he had the big 64 box of Crayolas, and I had like the 6 box, the ones you look at and they break. And and so mine broke, and I was crying because I was a very sensitive child. My brother likes to say I was a nerd that could fight. And and he gave me his crayons, and we've been friends ever since. His dad was the inspiration for Buddy Lee.
Oh, wow.
And the funny thing was, I remember when my grandfather passed away, and I didn't really know how to process that. And so I was hanging out with my friend Joey at his house with his dad. I was really upset. I was very angry. I just didn't know how to talk about it. So his dad comes and he's like, hey, let's go outside. Let's shoot some guns. I'm like, all right, I'm down for that. So we go outside and we shoot guns. We're having fun. And it sort of helped me process a little bit of my grandfather. My grandfather was a big influence on me. And I'll never forget, we were leaving, and his dad said to me, he said, hey, anytime you want to come shoot guns, you come on back. That's fine. That's how men like that tell you they love you. So that's how Buddy Lee came up.
What a great story. Next, right here in the front.
I mean, I'm so sorry, but that's on you. Like
I honestly don't feel like that's on me because you didn't let Titus sleep, and last night I couldn't sleep, and that's all on you. But I love the way that you describe the way that your characters, they almost like they speak to you.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever disagreed with the character's voice about where they thought the story was going, where they were telling you the story was going, and where you wanted to?
Oh, all the time. Yeah. Titus wouldn't shut up about stuff. Buddy Lee was like, Bug was like that. Bug was like that a lot. Like I knew where I wanted it to go, and he kept taking it this way. I'll tell you a funny story about that real quick. So the original ending of Black Star Wasteland is very different from what you see reading the book. The original ending was he left a teddy bear in a hospital room. Now I won't give anything away. He left a teddy bear in a hospital room. There was a note pinned to it for his wife, and he had left. He had gone. And I have a female friend of mine who's a writer named Kelly Garrett, and she had read it, and she told me, she's like, if you end that book like that, I will hate you for years. We'll still be friends, but I'll hate you. And what that taught me was I thought Bug was telling me he didn't want to confront her. Mm-hmm. But what I realized was I wasn't ready to confront her. Mm-hmm. And so I rewrote it because in that book, Kia is the only person who's not afraid of Bug. And she has earned the right for him to explain himself. And so that's why I changed it, and that's why you're the ending that you get now. But yeah, Bug did it all the time. He didn't want to listen to nothing I say. Thank you for the question.
Question or comment right here?
I wanted to thank you for your books. I read 3 of your books back to back. I went to high school in Virginia, in Chesapeake.
Oh, wow.
And in college, summer college there, and used to ride up and down the roads. It just reminded me so much of all the places I've been, Newport News, which is one word, by the way.
Yeah. It's Newport News. It's not Newport News.
All that, exactly. So, but thank you so much. I enjoyed them. I can't wait for the next one.
Oh, thank you so much. I love that. I love being able to work Virginia into my stories. You know, a lot of times when you see Virginia in TV and movies, it's always Langley and CIA and Quantico. It's never the Chesapeake. It's never Tidewater. There's a whole lot of stuff going on down there. I mean, a lot of it I can't talk about, but there's a lot of stuff going on there.
And we got a question or comment up top there.
Do you reread books? And if you reread books, what books do you reread?
Yeah.
Which ones have you reread the most?
The most is probably Cotton Comes to Harlem by Chester Himes, Darkness Take My Hand by Dennis Lehane, and Red Dragon by Thomas Harris. I read Darkness Take My Hand every Halloween because it is a scary damn book. Y'all, if you have not read Dennis Lehane, like my Mount Rushmore of crime writers is Sue Grafton, Elmore Leonard, Dennis Lehane, and Walter Mosley. I've met 3 of those people and been I've actually gotten drunk with Dennis Lehane, but it's so funny because I'm going on a tangent, but I'll just say real quickly, Lehane writes such evocative darkness. He really knows how to touch that darkness inside you. And he used to say, we did an interview together, and somebody asked him, like, how do you get over that when you write that book? And he's like, yeah, I got to take some time to decompress. I got to walk away from it. And they asked me that, and I was like, I play with my cat. I don't know what it's like. I don't know if they say more about him than me. But, yeah, Darkness Take My Hand is probably the one I read the most. Tied with Red Dragon.
Red Dragon, that's the Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah.
Did you like how they did that? They first came out with, it was out of order in a sense.
Yeah. The original, they did a movie called Manhunter, which in
Yeah.
my opinion,
Came out in the 80s.
yeah, in the 80s with William L. Peterson. That's closer to the original book than anything else that's been done.
That's a wild movie.
It's a crazy movie.
Next question or comment.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. I absolutely adore Razorblade Tears. It was like one of my favorite books of that year that I read it. And I just wanted to ask, with that like wild success of Razorblade Tears, going into your next work, All the Sinners Bleed, and then now again with Kings of Ashes, has that like pressure added anything? Have you changed anything about your writing and that expectation that comes with that?
You know what's funny? Like the publishers didn't put pressure on me. I put pressure on myself. Like I kept starting All the Sinners Bleed. I couldn't get it. I couldn't find the rhythm. For me, writing is like playing music. I've got to find the rhythm. I got to find the melody so I can get the story going. And I just couldn't. And I ended up hanging out with a buddy of mine, my friend Eric Pruitt, and we were having a drink. He owns a bar in addition to being a writer. And I was talking about it, and he said something to me that I've taken as a piece of advice. He said, well, it ain't got to be as good as Razorblade Tears. It just got to be good. And I remember that just sort of freed me up. I was like, yeah, it just got to be. I don't have to replicate myself. I just got to tell a good story. So after All Sinners Bleed, I didn't have as much difficulty because I just kept thinking it just got to be good. It don't have to be good as All Sinners Bleed. So that's something that I actually have that written above my desk now. But yeah, I put a lot of pressure on myself with that, more so than I needed. Thank you for the question.
Next question or comment over here.
Yes, hi. I've been following you on social media.
Mm-hmm.
Can y'all hear? Turn that volume up a little bit. Go ahead.
I've been following you on social media for years,
Okay.
and
I'm sorry.
no, it's fine. And one day I asked myself, it's like, why haven't I read any of his books?
Mhm.
Somebody had told me about one of your books before, but I kind of had it mixed up. I thought it was another author that I
Mhm.
had met that was kind of rude, and I was like, well, I want to read this book. And I love your books, and
Thank
I
you.
also love the way you tackle issues
Mm-hmm.
on social media. Do you ever worry about things? You know how people are on social media?
Nope.
So you know where I'm going with
Yeah,
this.
just go to his X account right now.
I will say to that. So if people follow me on social media, I don't like bullies. I don't like dummies. I don't like people that are mean and racist. And I get into it. People sometimes. My proudest moment is I got into it with Charlie Kirk one time because he said Joe Biden was the worst vice president ever, and I said Aaron Burr killed a guy. So like, but no, I feel like as a person who has a voice, you have to speak out about things. I was speaking about things before I was a writer, and so I don't worry about it. I've lost fans. I've had people tell me, well, I'm not going to buy your books anymore. I was like, all right, you ain't take no food in my mouth. I'm going to be fine. And so I think you can't worry about that. I have a tattoo on my arm that says, writers tell lies to find the truth. As long as I feel like I'm telling the truth, I feel like I'm in the right. Truth is always in season. So I don't worry about that. But thank you for the question.
All right. Right here. With the gray. Right here.
Hi. I know you said that you're a writer, so a writer has to write, but would you ever explore a different genre besides Southern fiction, maybe a different...
That's a great question. So what if you guys can hear it, she asked me, would I ever explore a different genre in Southern fiction? I don't know. Okay, that's a very interesting question because I had a meeting the other day with my publisher and my agent and all those folks about what I'm going to do next. So I had two ideas, right? I have one idea, which is a straight-up Southern crime fiction story about two best friends. One is an artist. He makes stained glass windows based on a friend of mine. The other person's a hitman, and they're best friends. And every year they go on a fishing trip together. They've been friends their whole lives. And it's really a story about male friendships, right? How do we make male friendships? And also, when does a friendship die? When does a friendship run its course? And so the plot of that story is they're looking for a young kid who's run away, and one of them might be the father. So that's one story, right? That's straight up going to be in the South. It's going to be all the stuff that I usually do. Somebody's going to get hit in the head with a wrench. Somebody's going to drink moonshine. But then I had an idea for another story that I tentatively have called The California Book, because I want to write a story about Bug's father when he went to California.
Oh.
And I want to go back in time and talk about that. And I was talking to my editor and my agent, and they were not so hot on that idea, right? They was like, well, you're the king of Southern noir and all that kind of stuff. I said, but I want to challenge myself. I want to try something different. So I've thought about writing a story like that. I've also thought about writing a non-crime story about my grandfather. My grandfather was a moonshiner. He fought in World War One. They didn't call him snipers back then, but he was a specialty soldier. My grandfather was a really interesting character, and I've thought about writing his story. There's a legend in our family my grandfather's brother was killed, and nobody knows who did it. But the legend in my family is my grandfather knew who did it, and he took him out on a crab boat, and he chopped him up and put him in a crab pot and killed him. So if you knew my granddaddy, you would not think that was a legend. And so I've been thinking about that, too. So, I've been able to write in other genres, though. I've written horror stories. I've written a trilogy of kids' books with Questlove. I wrote a book called Rhythm of Time, and we have 2 more books coming out in the next 2 years. And so that's a kid's sci-fi story, which was really fun for me. It was a challenge for me because sometimes you write crime fiction. If it's not going well, you just shoot somebody,
Right.
It's Chekhov's gun, If it ain't going well, hit somebody in the face with a shovel. And I couldn't lean on it. You can't have kids doing that, obviously. But I was able to write that story, and it ended up being really fun and really exciting. I got onto the Night Show with it. That was really cool. So I think for me, I think I can write anything. I just know what I'm more comfortable with. So if that answers your question, I'm sorry.
What about a story about a black journalist in the South? I don't know. She has 2 cats.
But see, then if it's my story, then the cats are gonna kill you. I'm kidding.
Yeah, we're gonna talk. Next question.
Okay. Thank you so much for being here. I got to say, Razor Blade Tears has inspired me to write my first novel, so I appreciate
That is
you.
awesome.
I'm so
Give her a round of applause.
Yes.
That is awesome.
Thank you. So I have a 2-part question. Do you have any say when it comes to the casting for your audiobooks? And if so, do you think these people do them justice?
Yes and yes. So I'll tell you, this is a funny story. When we got the auditions for the audiobooks, we got 5 audition tapes, right? 4 of them were terrible. It was just awful. And I think it was because the actors were thinking, well, these are Southern books, so I got to give this Southern accent. But they all sound like Foghorn Leghorn, They were like, I'll say, we're going to race a car. And it's like, whoa, nobody talks like that. I don't care if you're from the Delta, nobody talks like that. And then the 5th person was the actor and narrator, Adam Lazar White. And he does an amazing job. He's so cool. And it's funny because the moment I heard him, that's how Bug sounds in my head. And that's how I said, I don't know who that is, but I want him to do it. And it's so funny because he used to be on soap operas, right? He used to be on Young and the Restless. And I wish my grandmother was alive because if you're a Southerner of a certain age, your grandmama and Victor Newman helped raise you. Mm-hmm. And I want to tell my grandmother that Nathan Haston narrates my books, and she would lose her mind.
Next question or comment. Where are we going? Here? Oh, right here. Yes.
Hi. First of all, I'm just going to say that I'm a federal employee, and this is the most I've laughed and smiled in the last few weeks.
I'm glad.
So thank you so much for being here. And my question, how long does it take you to do a first draft of a novel?
That's a good question. Usually 8 to 9 months. I don't like writing multiple drafts because I'm lazy. So I write the first draft, and then I send it to my editor, and then she give me her notes, and then I finish it. I only do 2 drafts. I got stuff to do. I ain't got time. No, and I actually feel like the first draft for me, and this works for me. I feel like the first draft is as close to the actual story as I can. It's funny because one of my favorite movies is Amadeus, and there's a scene in Amadeus where at the end he's trying to write his last opera, and he's dying, and Salieri is trying to help him, and he's giving him all these directions, and Salieri is like, "You got to slow down," and he's like, "This is me slowing down." And sometimes that's how it feels. It's never as good on the paper as it is in my head. And I feel like there's a law of diminishing returns. If I keep messing with it, I'm going to dilute it. So I only do 2 drafts. But then what I do is I send it to my writer friends that I respect. And I let them read it, give me notes, give me impressions. How does it feel? A lot of writing is feeling for me. It's very instinctual. And they're like, I think that's because it's because you're born a writer or you're not. I really do believe that. I think you get an MFA, you can go to college, and all that, but you either can tell a story or you can't. And so for me, it's very instinctual. But after I do that, it's about a 3 or 4 month process as it goes through the edits and you go through copy edits. God bless copy editors. They catch all the stuff that we forget. And then once that's done, about a year for the whole process. But thank you. That's a great question.
Next question or comment.
I have a comment and a question. First,
Okay.
thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank
I run
you.
a book club called the Q Connect, and we do not read the same book. We eat all different books, all different genres. And I will say, every single book club that I throw, someone has read your book. And we had a little discussion. These are my book club girls. Say yay.
Hey.
We had a discussion right beforehand. We had a book club at a nearby hotel before we came here as an appetizer. And we were having a little argument, okay, about
Okay.
which is our favorite book. So
Okay.
I will ask you, what is your favorite book?
Oh, that's like picking your favorite children.
And we do have a favorite child.
I will say, I don't want to say my favorite, but the book that means the most to me is probably Blacktop Wasteland. Because I wrote that book real angry. I had been dropped by my agent. Nobody was checking for me. Like, they were publishers wouldn't spit on me if I was on fire. And I sat down there and, I thought, I'm going to write a book about everything I like. I grew up with my cousins racing cars. I grew up poor in the South. I grew up with men like Bug, men who aren't bad. They just don't have the tools to be the men that they should be. My uncles were like that. My uncles did not take no wooden nickels. I'm going to tell you that right now. I once saw my uncle slap a man so hard his pants fell down. And so that's a true story. And so, but for me, Blacktop Wasteland is as close to me sort of saying how I feel about who I am, It's so funny because my mom read it, and she was like, I love the book, but is this mother in here supposed to be me? And I was like, no, not at all.
As we wrap up, and I want to thank everybody for your questions and comments, because family is important to you, obviously, and you mentioned your mom. I may know the answer to this, we all probably do, but just to reflect on what she's meant to you. And
It's funny. She was a complicated woman. She was a frustrated artist herself. She was a painter and a poet. She lost the use of her hands, and so she painted with her mouth. She was the strongest person I know. She also got on my nerves sometimes. I loved her, and we argued. We were a lot alike. We butted heads. But I remember when Darkest Prayer was being bandied about, and it wasn't getting picked up. I was really down. I was really depressed, and I had this MacBook and computer, and I went by to check on her because she wanted to live by herself as long as she could. She was so independent. So I went by to check on her, and I was talking to her, and I was like, yeah, I think I'm going to pawn this computer. I said, I'm going to sell it. I'm going to put it on Craigslist or something. I said, this ain't going to happen. And she said to me, she says, you can do that if you want. You grown. You do what you want. That's always her thing. You grown. You do what you want. She said, but I don't think that'll make you happy. Writing makes you happy. She said, who are you hurting by writing? And I said, I guess nobody. She said, well, keep doing it. My mom was somebody who, she didn't let our poverty define us. She was well-read. She was well-educated, smartest person I know. The strength that she exhibited through all the things that she went through made me realize that you can weather the storm, you can persevere. It's not easy, and it won't always be fun, but if you have a goal, if you have a mindset, if you have a motto, if you have something that you can hold on to, then you can persevere. There's a biblical quote in the book that Titus' dad quotes all the time. I've never seen the righteous forsaken, and I've never seen his fruit go hungry. And that was my mom's favorite one. And so I'll tell you this. I'll finish up with this.
Are you good?
So I don't want to give a spoiler away, but there's a scene in the book, in All Sinners Bleed, where something happens to a character. They get injured, and they're talking to someone else. And it's like, yeah, man, I was really messed up, and I thought I heard Mom's voice. I thought I heard her talking to me. And the character's like, well, that was my endorphins. That was adrenaline. I know it wasn't real. And the other character says, why don't you pretend it was? Because I'd give anything to hear her voice again. When I read that book, I can hear her talking to me.
And S.A., I feel like her story needs to be told.
I used to tell her all the time. She didn't even let me write it. And she's thrown I want to hear about that. And it's like, I don't know, because the way her and my daddy met was crazy. So my daddy and my mom met at a drive-in movie theater. There was these boys that she had a bucket full of popcorn and some candy. These boys took the candy. And my daddy ran them down and took it back. That's how they met.
You know what I've noticed about your family? They beat the hell out of people.
I mean,
Like, you don't roll up on the Cosby. You don't roll up on your folk.
you know, it's funny you said it. My brother, one time, I have a cousin. His nickname is the Maul, Maul, because he hit a guy so hard one time the doctor thought he'd been attacked with a hammer. And my brother one time, we were out, and I was a big nerd. I read a lot as a kid, but also on a wrestling team. I played football. And I remember one time this guy was picking at me at a cookout. And my brother, who's older than me, and my brother was sitting there, he didn't even look up. And my brother was like, "You don't want them problems." I'm telling you. But actually, we're a big loving family, and I love my family. We are. Just don't pick with us. It's like
Duly noted. S.A., continued success, brother. It's been a pleasure, man.
Thank you
I've
so much for
enjoyed
having
this
me.
so
Thank you
much,
for doing
yeah.
it. Thank you all so much for being here.
S.A. Cosby.